Having a bad reputation will affect your organisation in many ways, none of them good. And in the age of AI, the bad stuff never goes away. The LLMs never forget. People will be finding that negative information for a very long time to come. So when you're under pressure, how do you communicate in a way that builds trust, that stops negative issues spiralling into something bigger? I'm about to give you 3 ways you can do just that. The first important concept I want you to remember is that when something's gone wrong, perhaps your organisation's made a mistake or a customer's expectation hasn't been met, you need to communicate with the people who are directly impacted first. What I often see in businesses and organisations is issues or complaints or problems that are not addressed, that keep growing until they spill over into social media or even mainstream media. And now the organisation is communicating on a large scale. But they forgot to actually communicate directly with the people who are affected in the first place. Now that could be picking up the phone and talking to them, having a direct conversation, or even emailing them personally, but making sure that they're not hearing about this for the first time from major public communication. Now we've seen plenty of examples over the years. The most dramatic one was Optus and its O outage. A terrible situation, a life and death situation, when some people weren't able to call for emergency services when they most needed it. And even worse, they didn't know why, because Optus apparently hadn't communicated directly with any of the people most impacted. Now, the whole situation wasn't managed well, but the aspect of it that really got them criticised severely was the fact that they didn't communicate directly with the people most impacted. So with any issue or problem in your organisation, always be thinking, who are the key stakeholders here? Who are the ones that have the most interest in this issue and can have the most impact on the outcome of the issue? Communicate with them first and communicate directly. And I can think of many examples over my career where that has been done effectively and it's made a huge impact. In fact, in some cases, that issue has never even made it into the public domain. There was one government agency fairly recently that had a big problem. Something had gone wrong in their operations, which could have had a big impact. It could have been actually a national scandal. It could have actually affected the country very broadly. But what they did, what they were convinced to do eventually, was to bring those key stakeholders together and they spoke to them directly. That took courage. It was not easy. It was also risky. Those people could have got angry, could have gone to the media, but actually none of those things happened because even though they didn't love what they were being told, they appreciated the honesty. They appreciated the transparency. And even though some negative stories did find their way ultimately into the media, it was not the big storm that it could have been if that agency simply ignored those stakeholders and the problem continued to grow. So communicate first with those impacted the most. And that not only is going to mean that you're doing the right thing in terms of serving your stakeholders, but it's also going to definitely increase your chances of that issue not erupting into a big crisis in the public domain. Now, the second principle, and it's related to the first, is that with your communication, start on the inside first. Often what we do is focus purely on our social media channels and on the external facing communication when there's a problem. And we forget that if we just have conversations or communication within our own walls first, that's going to go some way to addressing the problem. Or at least it's going to ensure that key people with the stake in that issue aren't missed out of the communication loop. So don't forget your board, your staff, other key groups that could impact the issue or have a high interest in it. What are you doing to communicate internally first before you communicate outside? Now, in a very fast-moving issue, it's not always possible to line the ducks up and get to all the right people first. But this is where you've really got to be strategic. Really map out who the key stakeholders are so that you can make sure that communication, it might have to happen simultaneously in some cases, but at least your key people aren't hearing it secondhand. They're not hearing a version from somebody who's been critical of your organisation. Tell it to them straight, early, and focus on communicating inside your walls, if you can, first. Now, my third principle presupposes that the issue has grown into something bigger. And it's this: you must ensure that you have spokespeople who are ready to stand up and communicate. Some organisations and businesses have a rock star CEO who are just great in the spotlight. But I can't tell you the number of times where things have erupted in organisations that I've worked with when the boss is away, they're on holidays, or they're just not available. Then there's a big problem because there isn't anybody readily to step into that role. I always like to say you've got to have a deep bench. You've got to have leaders in your organisation who are trained up in being able to front the media, or community meetings, or shareholder meetings, or board meetings, whatever it is in relation to your organisation. It can't all rest with one person. That's a high risk strategy. So make sure your spokespeople are match fit. The best time to do that is when there isn't a big issue. So plan for that in the calm times. When the turbulence hits, that's not the ideal time to be running around working out who's going to publicly respond. So your spokespeople need to be skilled, they need to be trained. And I'm not just talking about standard media training around where you stand in relation to the camera and that sort of thing. I'm talking about really understanding how to convey a message authentically, how to convey it clearly, how to connect with an audience, even in a hostile environment. Senior leaders in your organisation, or if you're a small business, several of your leaders need to be able to do that. That takes practice, it takes training, but it's well worth the investment. Again, I can give you many examples of organisations facing quite thorny issues who had leaders who were able to step in and communicate with credibility, even if they weren't the most senior person in the organisation. They were able to represent their organisation well. They were a key trust torchbearer, and that went a long way towards conveying their narrative in that issue and restoring trust. So it starts with preparation and planning, and this is an all year round activity. Make sure your spokespeople are ready, because you never know when an issue will start to percolate. There's a bit of a myth that crises are always immediate situations that are unexpected. That's rarely the case. Sometimes something will happen that impacts your business or organisation that you didn't see coming. Perhaps it was completely out of your control, but those situations are in the minority. The vast majority of times, crises grow from smaller issues or problems that were not addressed well. So you can go a long way towards heading those off at the pass by thinking about all of your stakeholders, communicating first with those most affected. Also, remember to communicate within your own walls before you communicate outside, ideally. And make sure that your spokespeople are ready to go if and when something goes wrong. If your organisation would like support in how you can be better prepared to stop issues spiralling, or in fact, if you've got a major problem and you'd like support from a trusted advisor, reach out to me. I can also help to prepare your executive team to make sure that they're the spokespeople that your organisation needs them to be, and that all of your staff can be reputation ambassadors. I hope you never find yourself on the wrong end of a big crisis, but we can never be sure. So preparation is key. I hope this has been useful. Bye for now.